Kari Lake, who right now is leading the Arizona Republican gubernatorial race, that nomination. She says she's already won. She's held a news conference saying that she has won, that she's already declaring victory, that she is the nominee. And to be fair, the wind is at her back. A lot of these last-minute votes, the in-person votes, have broken for Lake. Despite the fact that she is leading just by a hair, she says that she still believes the 2020 election was stolen, that Donald Trump should be the president. And take a listen to what she says, the logic of why she thinks that she might be in the lead. Aaron, listen.
We outvoted the fraud. We didn't listen to what the fake news had to say. The MAGA movement rose up and voted like their lives depended on it.
And the Trump-endorsed ticket has Kari Lake, if she happens to hold that lead at the very top. The Secretary of State, Mark Finchem, who has been on the QAnon circuit, who is also an election denier, Abe Hamadeh for Attorney General, and U.S. Senate Blake Masters. So, Aaron, at least at the top of the ticket, it does appear, if Lake holds on, this could be a clean sweep of Trump-endorsed candidates in the state of Arizona. Aaron?
It is so crucial, such a crucial state. All right, Kyung, thank you very much. So as we await that batch of ballots, I want to go now to one of the Republicans who resisted Trump's efforts to overturn the election in Arizona, Bill Gates, the chairman of Maricopa County's Board of Supervisors. Also with me, Alyssa Farah-Griffin, former White House communications director for then President Trump. So thank you both very much. Bill, let me start with you because we are awaiting this big batch of votes. You heard Kyung say this could be it. This could be the decisive batch in calling this, could make the race over. Your Republican Party's next nominee for governor could be an election denier who says Donald Trump won. She's currently in the lead. Just today, right, said there were shenanigans with this election that she may be about to win. Bill, what's at stake here?
Well, there's a lot at stake, and I would say it's the future of the Arizona Republican Party, if not the future of this democracy here in the state of Arizona. As you mentioned earlier, we have several of the candidates now who are going to be the nominees of the Republican Party here in Arizona who are anti-democratic, small d. They don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in our election system. Look, I talked to the lawyer who headed up the election day operations for Arizona Republican Party yesterday. He said we had a great election. It ran very smoothly. And yet Kari Lake is saying that there was fraud, that they outvoted the fraud. So they're lying about this. They have a narrative that they're trying to push, and it is very dangerous.
Very dangerous and very sinister, right? Because if people don't believe in elections, then right, there goes the country. Alyssa, Kari Lake has made this a point, right, all the way through her campaign, and even today. Right, today she had plenty to say about rigged elections. Here is Kari Lake from today alone.
The Republic is in jeopardy because of shady elections, and people know it. I think if you looked at how last night and yesterday went down, you could see there were some very serious problems. I am not satisfied with how the election was run.
There were a lot of shenanigans going on. So, we knew the shenanigans were happening.
So, listen, the current Republican governor of Arizona is Doug Ducey, of course. He stood up to Donald Trump, refused to help him overturn the election. So, Alyssa, what happens if Kari Lake as governor of Arizona is crucial, right?
It's absolutely crucial. And I'd also note having an election-denying Trump-endorsed Secretary of State is almost more crucial. An effort by Trump World that's been underway for many, many months is to recruit secretaries of state who support him on these election lies so that if he is to run again in 2024 and not win, he actually could be successful in some of these efforts to overturn state results. But I would say this, I think last night's results are being framed as a victory for Trump, and I guess that's correct in the sense that many of his endorsees won, but it's a win for election lies, and it's a loss for democracy. I think that the MAGA monster of the election was stolen, you can't trust election results, has actually grown far bigger than just Trump himself. Across the board, I've seen even some what I would consider sane, serious candidates. Markwayne Mullin, member of Congress, saying, yes, I think the election was stolen. This is permeating the party to such a dangerous degree. And with someone like Kari Lake, it does look like she's going to pull it off, but I would remind the public she was an Obama supporter. She was anti-Trump when he was first elected, and now she is the voice of, spreading election lies. I think some of these people are charlatans, but the public is believing it, and that is the problem. As many as 60% of Republicans believe the election was stolen.
So, Bill, Alyssa raised a really important point, right, about the other race in your state that matters so much tonight, the Secretary of State race. So you don't have a lieutenant governor in Arizona. So Secretary of State's first in line to succeed the governor. And, of course, the Secretary of State oversees elections, right? So a double whammy of importance. Republican voters in Arizona chose Mark Finchem, who was part of the Stop the Steal movement, and who says the Arizona state legislature should be able to overturn the will of Arizona voters in presidential elections. So Finchem ends up your Secretary of State. Trump's a GOP nominee in 2024. Bill, what does this mean?
Oh, I'm very concerned about this. We need someone as our Secretary of State who is focused on, making sure that the elections run smoothly, but certainly not putting the finger on the scale. I have no question that Mark Finchem will put his finger on the scale. He has made that clear. In fact, shortly after the election in 2020, he said, you know what, we need to come up with a villain in this story. And he said, let's make it the Board of Supervisors. And that's exactly what you've seen through the audit and even today. On minute by minute, we're being attacked for this election that we ran on Twitter and elsewhere, and there's simply no basis for it. So you're absolutely right. They're attacking the foundations of democracy, and that's why we're going to keep saying the facts. And were there a couple of hiccups? Sure. But in fact, it was a very smoothly run election. And as I said before this election, if Kari Lake or someone else has problems with this election, they need to let us know. If there are things going on, they need to make us aware of it. But they're not, because issues are not happening that are going to affect the outcome one way or the other.
Well, Alyssa, I want to show it again because you raised this. It wasn't just Arizona. Across the country, candidates backed by Donald Trump who are openly and proudly election deniers won Republican primaries. Not all. There were some repudiations, but it happened in multiple states. What does this tell you about your party?
Well, it's unequivocally going in the wrong direction. And I hate to get political because the most important thing here, frankly, is the undercutting of democracy and our basic institutions and trust in our elections. But I would also note that some of these candidates who were elected or nominated because they promoted the big lie are actually just not very good candidates. So Blake Masters, for example, who's now the Senate nominee, is going to face off against Mark Kelly, an incredibly popular Democrat he'll have a much tougher race for, as opposed to someone like Doug Ducey, who was chased out of the race and probably would have, gone into victory. And I'd also note I just want to mention my friend Peter Meyer in Michigan, one of the impeachment 10, came into office, a veteran, a successful businessman, honestly just one of the most principled young leaders I've gotten to know, lost his race for telling the truth. And now the nominee there is an election denier who, by the way, now the seat they're saying is a lean Democrat seat because he's such a weak candidate. He doesn't even live in the district. So what Trump is doing, playing in these, airing his grievances, is also just hurting the party broadly.